The flight home had been miserable. Delayed twice, crammed between a snoring businessman and an old lady who kept asking me about my lovely wife. I had smiled through it, nodding along, letting her believe whatever she wanted. Because truth be told, I didn't mind. I was just excited to be home early, to surprise Vanessa. We had been together for 5 years. She was my world. Everything I did, the late nights, the overtime, the constant grind, was all for us, for the future we were building together. Or at least, that's what I thought. I had even picked up her favorite flowers at the airport. Some overpriced boutique bouquet that smelled like spring and credit card debt. It didn't matter. She loved lilies, and I loved seeing her happy. I pulled into the driveway, the soft hum of the garage door rising as I parked. The house was dark except for the faint glow from the bedroom window. Strange. Vanessa usually had a lamp on in the living room or the TV playing in the background. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe she had fallen asleep early. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, eager, my chest warm with anticipation. I imagined the way her face would light up when she saw me, the way she'd throw her arms around me, surprised but happy. I had been so busy lately. I missed her. But the second I reached the door, something felt off. A sound. Muffled voices, a breathy laugh that wasn't mine. My grip tightened on the doorknob. No, that sick, twisting feeling in my stomach told me everything before I even pushed the door open. But I did it anyway, because some part of me, the part still clinging to the illusion of us, needed to see for myself. And there they were. Vanessa. Naked. In our bed. With him. The world tilted. The air left my lungs. My heart, God, my heart, felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and stomped on. For a moment, neither of them noticed me. They were too busy, too entangled in each other to realize their audience had arrived. But then Vanessa's eyes flicked up and met mine. And she didn't look guilty. She smirked. "Jake," she said casually, like I had just walked in on her watching TV, not ruining my entire fucking life. The pilot, because that's what he was, some uniformed asshole with a cocky grin and a chiseled jaw, stretched lazily, rolling onto his back as if this was just another Tuesday for him, and maybe it was. He looked me up and down and laughed. Actually laughed. "Losers like you don't get to keep girls like her," he said, amusement dripping from every syllable, like he was letting me in on a universal truth. I couldn't move. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to scream. But I just stood there, frozen, my mind stuck in an endless loop of this isn't happening, this isn't real. Wake up. Vanessa sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face like I was an inconvenient guest. "I was going to tell you," she said, not even bothering to cover herself. "Eventually." "Eventually," I repeated numbly. The word felt foreign in my mouth. She rolled her eyes, sitting up, the sheet slipping down her bare shoulders. "My bed. My fucking bed." "Jake, come on. You had to see this coming. You're safe, reliable, but I need more. I can't spend my life watching you dream while other men are actually living." I flinched. She said it so easily, so casually, as if she hadn't just shattered me. All the late nights, the overtime, the sacrifices, all for her, and it was never enough. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had loved, the woman I had planned to marry, the woman I thought was my future. And all I saw was a stranger. The pilot smirked, stretching again, like this was his house, his bed, his life. "You should take the hint, man," he said. "Some of us were just built for more." The world around me blurred. The walls felt like they were closing in. Vanessa exhaled, standing up, completely unbothered. "I think you should leave, Jake." I blinked at her. She was kicking me out of my own goddamn house. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember walking back down the stairs, or how I ended up back in my car, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The bouquet of lilies sat in the passenger seat, still wrapped in crisp white paper. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then the emotions crashed down all at once. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak. I don't remember driving to the nearest bar. I just remember the whiskey burning my throat, the way the world turned numb with every drink, the way my reflection in the mirror looked like a ghost of the man I was just hours ago. Vanessa was gone. She had left me for a man who could give her more. And me, I was nothing. I drank until my vision blurred, until the ache in my chest dulled just enough to be bearable. I stumbled out of the bar sometime after midnight, the streets empty, the air cold and sharp. My mind raced. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to rebuild a life that had always included her? The days passed in a blur, one indistinguishable from the next. I woke up. I went to work. I came home to an empty apartment. Sometimes I ate. Most nights, I just drank. The whiskey burned less the more I swallowed, numbing everything in its wake. I barely noticed when my friends stopped calling, when my emails piled up unanswered, when my boss gave me wary looks in the office. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered. I had spent years believing in something that was never real, building a life around a woman who had been waiting for a better offer, for something more exciting than a man who worked long hours at a job she found boring. I had been so blinded by love that I hadn't seen the truth, that she was always going to leave. Some nights I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying it over and over. The way she smirked at me. The way that asshole in my bed had stretched lazily, like he belonged there. Like he hadn't just shattered my world. Losers like you don't get to keep girls like her. The words sank into my bones, festering. I should have been angry. I should have wanted to burn the world down. Instead, I just felt empty. One night, the walls of my apartment felt too small, suffocating me with the memories of Vanessa. I grabbed my coat and left, stepping into the cold, wet streets without a destination. The city was alive around me, bright with neon lights and the hum of people moving, laughing, drinking, living. I kept walking, past restaurants we had once eaten at, past the cafe where I had met her for the first time, past the park where we had talked about marriage. I walked until my feet ached, until the numbness in my chest turned into something else, a heavy, aching exhaustion. The rain had started falling, soft at first, then harder, drenching my clothes as I wandered through the quiet streets. I barely noticed. My mind was a haze, my body moving forward on instinct alone. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. And then, the headlights came out of nowhere, a blaring horn, the screech of tires, a massive shape barreling toward me. I turned my head just in time to see the truck skidding across the slick pavement, its headlights blinding. I felt the split second before impact, the weight of inevitability pressing down on me. Then, nothing. Darkness. Cold, suffocating darkness. There was no pain, no sound. Just an eerie silence, as if the world had vanished around me. I felt weightless, drifting in the void, untethered from time and space. I had thought that dying would come with some sort of clarity, some kind of grand realization. Instead, there was just emptiness. But then, something shifted. A pull. A sharp, electric jolt, like being yanked from the depths of the ocean. My body lurched, my lungs burned, and suddenly, I gasped for air. I was lying on my back, staring at a ceiling that looked wrong, different. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest, each beat hammering into my ribs with a force that felt too intense, too alive. My skin tingled, my muscles trembled with an unfamiliar energy. I sat up abruptly, my breath ragged, my head spinning. I was in my old apartment, but not the way I had left it. The furniture was arranged differently. The air smelled like fresh laundry and Vanessa's perfume, not like the stale, alcohol-soaked emptiness I had grown used to. My hands shook as I ran them over my arms, my face, my chest. Everything felt younger, stronger. Panic clawed at my throat. I turned my head sharply, my gaze landing on the nightstand. My phone was sitting there, buzzing with an incoming call. That wasn't right. That phone had been dead for years. The screen lit up. My stomach lurched. David, my best friend. The same David who had moved out of state 5 years ago. I reached for the phone with trembling fingers, barely able to press the answer button. Jake, hey, you there? His voice was exactly the same. Like no time had passed at all. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. I shot out of bed, nearly knocking over a chair in my rush to get to my desk. My laptop was there, exactly where I used to keep it back then. My fingers moved on instinct, typing in the date. And when the screen loaded, my heart nearly stopped. 5 years ago. I staggered back, my pulse hammering in my ears, my vision blurring. This had to be a mistake, a dream, a hallucination. But everything was too real. The familiar weight of my watch on my wrist, the feel of my clothes against my skin, clothes I hadn't owned in years. I stumbled into the bathroom, flicked on the light, and gripped the sink as I stared into the mirror. And there I was. Not the broken, hollow version of myself I had become. Not the man who had been drinking himself into oblivion for weeks. This was me before it all fell apart. Younger, sharper, before Vanessa had betrayed me. Before I had wasted my time loving someone who never truly loved me back. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the frantic beat of my own heart. I was alive. I was here. I had been given a second chance, and I knew exactly what that meant. At first, I thought I was going insane. But then, the memories came rushing in. The stock market booms, the businesses that would explode in value, the trends that would make millionaires out of ordinary men. I remembered every opportunity I had missed, every wrong turn I had taken, every wasted moment. I remembered the day Vanessa would first meet the pilot. I remembered the moment she would betray me. I remembered exactly how I had let myself be a fool for love, blind to the truth staring me in the face. But not this time. This time, I wouldn't waste a second. No Vanessa, no wasted potential, no playing small. This time, I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to win. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was too sharp, too awake, a storm of memories and calculations spinning endlessly. I sat at my desk, my laptop glowing in the dim light of my apartment, and stared at the numbers on the screen. I knew exactly how the next 5 years would play out. I knew which companies would explode, which startups would go public, which industries would skyrocket. Most people had to work for decades, study markets, take risks, hope they were making the right investments. I didn't have to hope. I already knew. The first move was easy. I liquidated every bit of money I had. It wasn't much, not yet. A couple thousand in savings, a credit card I knew I could max out and pay off later, even the emergency fund I'd always been cautious about touching. Caution wasn't in the plan anymore. I wasn't going to scrape by. I was going to dominate. I poured every penny into stocks I knew were about to skyrocket. Tech companies that were still underground, startups about to change the industry, cryptocurrencies that would explode in the coming months. Bitcoin was still cheap. Ethereum was a joke to most people. Tesla stock was nowhere near its peak. I bought them all. And then I waited. But I didn't sit still. The first few weeks passed in a blur. Every morning I woke up with a purpose. I tracked the markets, set up automated alerts, followed every financial movement like a man possessed. The numbers began to rise, just as I knew they would. At work, I was a different man. No longer the overworked, exhausted employee barely keeping up with deadlines, grinding away for a paycheck that never stretched far enough. I had one foot out the door already. I carried myself with a confidence I had never had before. The office politics, the empty small talk, the pointless meetings that used to eat away at me, none of it mattered anymore. I wasn't here to climb the corporate ladder. I was here to buy the whole damn building. Within 3 months, my account had tripled. By 6 months, I wasn't just comfortable. I was rich. The small investments I had made were turning into hundreds of thousands. The crypto market was booming. The tech stocks were surging. My initial cash had snowballed into something so much bigger, and the only thought running through my mind was, this is only the beginning. But I didn't stop there. I started flipping real estate. Small investments at first, cheap properties that I knew were in neighborhoods about to gentrify, commercial spaces I could lease before rent prices spiked. I made quick deals, profitable deals, the kind that stacked my wealth even faster. I wasn't gambling, I was playing with loaded dice. While other investors hesitated, unsure if a market would rise, I already knew the outcome. And I used that to build a financial empire from nothing. Then there was Vanessa. I had avoided her for months, too focused on my work, too hungry for success to waste time with a woman who had already betrayed me once in another life. But I could feel it creeping closer, the moment she would meet him. The pilot. I still remembered the exact night it had happened. A girls' night out. A trip to some upscale bar downtown. She had met him at the counter, charmed by his smooth talk, his easy arrogance, the promise of a life filled with luxury and adventure. The affair had started soon after. But this time, I wouldn't be the fool waiting at home. The numbers were climbing. Every day my investments grew. Stocks surging, crypto booming, real estate flipping faster than I could close the deals. I had turned a few thousand into hundreds of thousands, and I was just getting started. I was building an empire. And Vanessa? She thought she still had me wrapped around her finger. She had no idea I already knew about the pilot. It had started just like I remembered. Small signs that most men would brush off. The way she would take longer to respond to texts. The sudden enthusiasm for girls' nights out. The quiet flicker of guilt in her eyes when I caught her staring off into space, lost in thought. I had lived through this before, blindly, painfully, thinking I was just being paranoid. Not this time. This time, I was watching everything unfold before she even realized I was paying attention. The late-night whispers, when she thought I was asleep. The extra showers, washing away his scent. The little lies that slipped too easily off her tongue. I knew the exact moment she had crossed the line. It had been 2 weeks ago. A Saturday. She had told me she was visiting her sister in the next city over. I had kissed her goodbye at the door, watched her get into an Uber, and waited exactly 15 minutes before checking my phone. She wasn't heading toward her sister's house. She was going to a hotel. And when I saw the name listed on the reservation, I smiled. Tonight was the night. I walked into the apartment like nothing had changed, carrying the weight of everything I knew. She was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine, wearing the same innocent expression I had fallen for years ago. Only now I wasn't blind. She turned to me with that practiced smile, the one she used when she was trying to keep things normal. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" I almost laughed. The audacity! I set my keys on the counter and leaned back, arms crossed. My voice was calm, unreadable. "We need to talk." Vanessa blinked, tilting her head just slightly. A test, gauging my mood. "Okay," she said slowly. "What's up?" I studied her for a moment, watching the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, a nervous tic she didn't even realize she had. She had done it the night she lied about visiting her sister. She had done it every time she thought she was getting away with something. I exhaled, the weight of everything I'd been waiting to say settling on my tongue. "We're done." A flicker of something crossed her face. Confusion. Then control. She forced out a laugh. "What? Jake, what are you talking about?" I tilted my head, watching her carefully. "I'm talking about you. About us. About the fact that I know you've been fucking a pilot behind my back." Silence. For the first time in her life, Vanessa had nothing to say. She froze, wine glass still in her hand, her lips parting slightly like she wanted to deny it but couldn't. She wasn't prepared for this. Her mind was scrambling. I could see it in the way her fingers tightened around the glass, in the way she took a tiny step back, like she could somehow create distance from the truth. "Jake." "Don't," I cut in smoothly. "Don't insult me by pretending. I know everything, Vanessa. The hotel, the late-night meetups, the way you tiptoe around the apartment like I'm too stupid to notice what's right in front of me." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. "Save it," I said, my voice sharp but steady. I don't need your excuses. I don't need your half-assed apologies. I don't need you. Her face paled. That had hit her, because this wasn't the reaction she had been expecting. She had been planning for a confrontation, maybe a fight, maybe tears and heartbreak and all the things that would make her feel powerful. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't broken. I was already gone. She set the wine glass down carefully, her fingers still trembling. Jake, wait. Can we just talk about this? I smiled. Actually, smiled. What's there to talk about? You already made your choice. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. She was losing control of the situation, and she knew it. Jake, you think I'm stupid? I said, stepping closer, voice quiet but razor sharp. You think I didn't notice? You think I didn't feel the way you pulled away, the way you hesitated just a little too long when I kissed you? The way you stopped looking at me like I was enough? Her eyes were wide now. You wanted more? I continued. Congratulations, Vanessa. You got it. Now you can go be with him. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no idea what to do. For the first time since I had met her, she wasn't the one in control. She blinked rapidly, her hands clenching at her sides. Jake, please, can we just talk about this like adults? I let out a low laugh, shaking my head. You don't get to play the reasonable card now. Not after what you did. Her breath hitched, but I wasn't done. I leaned in just slightly, enough for her to hear the final words I wanted to leave her with. I was going to marry you, I said, a voice quiet but firm. I would have given you everything, but you couldn't wait. You wanted more, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me. So here's your more, Vanessa. Here's your fucking freedom. I stepped back, turned on my heel, and walked toward the door. She didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, frozen, her perfect little world crumbling right in front of her. And when I stepped outside, into the crisp night air, I felt nothing but relief. No heartbreak, no pain, no regret. Because Vanessa? She was a distraction, and she had no idea how powerful I was about to become. I never used to care much about planes. Sure, I'd taken flights like everyone else, crammed in coach, dealing with screaming babies and overpriced airport food, wishing I had the legroom the first-class passengers did. But back then, aviation had just been another industry, another thing I never thought I'd have the money to worry about. And that changed the moment I woke up 5 years in the past. Because this time, I knew exactly where the world was heading. I knew that private aviation was about to explode. The wealthy elite were going to get richer. The demand for fractional jet ownership, private charter flights, and luxury air travel was going to skyrocket. The right investments now would mean billions later. And I wasn't about to sit on the sidelines. I started small. At first, it was just aggressive stock plays, buying up shares in airlines that were still recovering from their latest downturn, scooping up private aviation startups that were still too young for anyone to take seriously. Most investors weren't even looking at them yet, thinking the industry had plateaued. But I knew better. I dumped money into aviation tech companies, the ones that were working on more fuel-efficient private jets, new booking systems, and AI-powered flight scheduling. I diversified, spreading my investments across companies that would soon be the backbone of an industry no one saw coming. Within months, my bank account had doubled, then tripled. Every morning, I woke up, checked my portfolio, and watched the numbers climb. And I wasn't even close to done, because money was just the first step. I needed connections. I needed to be inside the industry. I forced my way into the world of the ultra-rich. At first, it was subtle. I attended small investor networking events, the kind where everyone looked down on you if you didn't have at least 7 figures in your portfolio. I played the role of the quiet but sharp newcomer, letting people talk, listening carefully, picking up on the way they did business. And I learned something fast. The truly powerful didn't chase opportunities. They positioned themselves so that opportunities chased them. Deals weren't being made in corporate offices. They were happening in high-end cigar lounges, on private golf courses, on yachts drifting across international waters. So I found ways to be there. I booked a membership at an exclusive business club, one of those places where billionaires drank scotch and whispered about their next big acquisition. I made introductions, got people talking, let them assume I was just another ambitious investor trying to make a name for himself. Then, I started making real connections. A venture capitalist who had poured millions into the aviation sector. A CEO who had just sold his airline software company and was already looking for his next project. A hedge fund manager who had access to pre-IPO stock offerings before they hit the market. I didn't just network. I absorbed everything. The way they talked. The way they handled negotiations. The way they carried themselves. Unshaken, untouchable. Like the world already belonged to them. And then, I started moving like them. I transformed everything about myself. I ditched the off-the-rack suits and cheap dress shoes and replaced them with custom-tailored Italian pieces that fit like they were made for royalty. I upgraded my watch, my car, my entire image. Because if you wanted to sit at the table with the elite, you had to look like you belonged. But it wasn't just the clothes, it was my presence. I stopped explaining myself, stopped asking, stopped looking for validation from anyone. Because the most powerful men in the world never seek approval. They command respect by existing. And once I figured that out, people started paying attention. Vanessa noticed. Of course she did. I wasn't on her radar at first. Why would I be? In her mind, I was still the boring guy she had left behind, the one who had wasted years loving her while she was sneaking around behind my back. But then, she started hearing the rumors. Jake Carter, the rising investor, the guy who had landed private meetings with multimillionaires, the name that was being passed around in finance circles, the one people were calling a future industry titan. She still brushed it off at first, probably thought I'd gotten lucky, probably thought I'd made a few decent investments and was riding a wave of success that would eventually crash. I knew her. I knew how she thought. She believed she had made the right choice when she left me. Believed that a guy like me could never really make it. She had no idea, because this wasn't luck. This wasn't a temporary hot streak. This was a carefully calculated rise to power, and she was about to see just how big I was going to become. The turning point came when I got my first major buy-in. One of the aviation startups I'd invested in, a private charter company focused on high-end business travel, was looking for expansion funding. They needed someone sharp, someone with money, someone who understood the industry. And my name? It was at the top of their list. They reached out, asked if I wanted a seat at the table. I didn't hesitate. That was the moment I stopped being just an investor. That was the moment I became a player. I walked into the meeting wearing a $10,000 suit, shaking hands with CEOs and hedge fund managers who wouldn't have given me the time of day a year ago. Now, they listened when I spoke. They saw me as one of them, because I was. I sat in that boardroom watching the numbers, analyzing the deals, listening to men talk about private aviation like it was just another asset class. But to me, it was more. It was the industry I was going to own. I had started at the bottom. I had been the guy Vanessa threw away, the one her pilot boyfriend had laughed at, and now, I was buying my way into the same world she thought I could never reach. Soon, it wouldn't just be an investment. I wouldn't just own shares in an airline. I'd own the entire damn sky. The moment I walked into the private airfield, I knew I had arrived. Not just physically, not just in a literal sense. I had arrived in power, in wealth, in dominance. This was my world now. The smell of jet fuel and money lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of imported cigars and overpriced whiskey from the VIP lounge nearby. A year ago, I wouldn't have been able to get past the security gate without an invitation. Now, I owned a stake in the damn place. The rise had been fast, ruthlessly efficient. I had moved through the aviation industry like a storm, making acquisitions that had seasoned executives questioning where I'd come from. I bought controlling stakes in private jet companies, outmaneuvering corporate giants who had assumed I was just another young investor trying to play in the big leagues. They underestimated me. They all did. I picked off struggling companies with valuable assets, absorbed charter fleets, luxury air travel startups, high-end maintenance firms, every piece of the puzzle that the elite relied on to keep their perfect little world running. And then, I cut off their options. I didn't just buy into aviation, I took control of it. For the ultra-rich, air travel wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. And when you control a necessity, you control everything. Meanwhile, the pilot's downfall had begun. Vanessa's new boyfriend, the same man who had laughed in my face, who had told me that losers like me didn't get to keep girls like her, was about to learn what it felt like to lose. At first, it was just small cracks in his perfect life. The airline he worked for was already struggling. I knew this because I'd watched the industry crumble and rebuild once before. Airlines were ruthless, their profit margins razor-thin, their ability to survive hinging on factors outside their control. Fuel prices, labor strikes, government regulations, investor confidence. And I knew exactly which strings to pull. I made a few strategic investments that sent ripples through the industry, betting against certain routes, positioning competitors for better deals, acquiring flight routes that made his airline's expansion plans impossible. His company started bleeding money. Then came the layoffs, the salary cuts, the uncertainty. It was only a matter of time before the cracks turned into a full collapse. And Vanessa? She was starting to feel it. The gala was one of the biggest events of the year. A billionaire's birthday party masquerading as a charity fundraiser. The kind of event where deals worth hundreds of millions were signed over glasses of Dom Perignon. I had been invited, of course, not as a guest, but as a power player. And I made my entrance known. I didn't just walk in. I arrived in my own jet. A Gulfstream G650, sleek, black, custom designed to my specifications. My logo discreetly embossed near the entrance, not gaudy, not screaming for attention. Just present enough for the right people to notice. The engines purred as I stepped down onto the tarmac, the private lounge glowing with golden light in the distance. The moment I emerged, I could feel eyes turning toward me. Some out of curiosity, some out of recognition, and some, the most important ones, out of respect. And then, there she was, Vanessa, standing in a shimmering designer dress, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by women just like her, women who had spent their lives chasing men who could offer them more. She looked the same, but different. Her posture was too stiff, her smile too rehearsed, and the moment her eyes locked onto me, I saw the flicker of shock. She wasn't expecting this. Not me. Not this version of me. I could see her mind racing, trying to process what she was seeing. The tailored suit, the effortless confidence, the fact that I had just stepped off my own jet. For the first time, I saw it hit her. The regret. The realization. She had thrown me away for a man whose career was falling apart, while I had been rising so far, so fast, that she had never even seen it coming. She still thought she had made the right choice. Until now. I didn't go to her. I didn't acknowledge her. I simply walked past like she didn't exist. I could feel the weight of her stare, the unspoken desperation of someone who suddenly knew what they had lost. And when I reached the entrance of the gala, the event's host, a billionaire investor who had built an empire in tech and aviation, stepped forward to greet me. "Jake Carter," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "I've been meaning to meet you. Word is, you're the man shaping the future of this industry." I smiled, calm, collected. That's the plan. Behind me, I knew Vanessa was still watching. And she wasn't smiling anymore. She was finally starting to understand. I wasn't just successful. I wasn't just rich. I had become untouchable. The deal had been in motion for months. Acquisitions like this didn't happen overnight. Not when you were trying to bury someone in the process. But I had been patient. I had waited, maneuvered, pulled the right strings, whispered the right things in the right ears. And now it was time to finish what I started. Vanessa's perfect man, the pilot who had laughed in my face, was about to learn what it felt like to be grounded permanently. Because today, I was buying the airline that owned him. I sat at the head of the long conference table, my presence impossible to ignore. The boardroom was filled with executives, lawyers, and financial analysts, some sweating, some feigning composure, and others barely able to hide their excitement at what was about to happen. This wasn't just another acquisition. This was a takeover, a hostile one. The airline had been bleeding for months, cracks forming in its foundation as bad management, outdated business models, and industry shifts slowly crushed it. I had made sure of it. I had pushed competitors into stronger positions, controlled flight routes, manipulated supplier contracts. I had bet against their success in ways they didn't even realize. And when their stock price plummeted, I swooped in. Now I was here to claim what was left of their empire. And Ryan Knox, the arrogant bastard Vanessa had left me for, was about to find out exactly how small he really was. He stormed in late, typical. Still carrying himself like he was the star of the show, even though everyone in the room knew his career was crumbling. His uniform was crisp, but there were dark circles under his eyes. His once effortless arrogance now layered with tension. He didn't know yet. Not completely. He knew the airline was in trouble. Knew there had been whispers of a buyout, but he didn't know who was behind it. Not until his gaze landed on me. His steps faltered, just slightly, before he recovered, forcing his expression back into something he probably thought looked intimidating. I leaned back in my chair, calm, in complete control. "Knox," I greeted smoothly. "Glad you could join us." His jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "What the hell are you doing here?" I smiled. Slow, calculated. "This," I gestured to the room, to the stack of documents in front of me, to the nervous executives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "This is my airline now?" Silence, the kind that suffocates. I let it settle, let it sink into his bones. He shook his head, a hollow laugh escaping his lips. "Bullshit." One of the executives cleared his throat, flipping through a folder with the final signed agreements. "It's not," he said, barely able to meet Knox's eyes. "Mr. Carter's firm now holds the majority stake in the company. The transition is effective immediately." Knox's face drained of color. I could see the moment it truly hit him. I could see the weight of it crashing down. His entire career, his future, his stability, vanishing right in front of him. And I wasn't done. I straightened my cuffs, exhaling slowly before fixing my gaze on him. I'd say it's nothing personal, but I let my lips curve just slightly. "It is." Knox's breathing turned sharp. "You can't do this." "I already did." His hand slammed onto the table, anger and desperation colliding in his eyes. "I have a contract." "That's the thing about contracts," I mused, my voice almost amused. "They're only good for as long as the company wants you. And this company?" I spread my hands. "It doesn't want you anymore." I watched the words tear into him. The cocky bastard who had once sneered at me, who had called me a loser, who had thought he was better than me, now standing there powerless, as I ripped his entire career out from under him. He turned toward the executives, his voice sharp. "This is a mistake. You need me." "We don't," one of the board members replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. "In fact, Mr. Carter has already arranged for replacements, effective immediately." That was the final blow. His whole body tensed, his hands shaking, his pride crumbling in real time. I stood slowly, adjusting my suit, looking down at him the way he had once looked down at me. "Security will escort you out," I said, my voice smooth, unwavering. "You're done here, Knox." His breath came in uneven bursts, his mind scrambling for a way out. There wasn't one. I had closed every door before he even knew he needed an exit. Vanessa panicked when she heard the news. Of course, she did. She had hitched herself to a man she thought would take her places, to a future she had assumed was secure. Now, her perfect life was falling apart. Knox was broke, unemployed, drowning in debt, the money gone, the luxury vanishing. The man she had bet her future on, not a star anymore, just another cautionary tale. And for the first time, I knew she truly understood. She had chosen wrong. She had traded a man who was building an empire for one who was crashing and burning. And when she finally saw me again, she wouldn't be looking at the man she once left behind. She'd be looking at the man she could never reach again. The event was being held at the rooftop of one of the most exclusive hotels in the city, the kind of place where billionaires shook hands over eight-figure deals, where luxury dripped from every marble surface, where the air itself smelled like wealth, exclusivity, and power. The men here weren't just rich, they were untouchable. The kind of men who dictated economies, who owned fleets of jets, who controlled industries with a single phone call. And tonight, I was one of them. I walked into the gala like I owned the place, because, in a way, I did. Not just in status, not just in the weight my name now carried, but in the way people turned when I entered the room. The murmurs, the side glances, the admiration. It wasn't just the tailored Tom Ford suit or the Rolex that cost more than some people's homes. It was the aura, the presence that came from knowing I had built myself into this. Once upon a time, I had been just another face in the crowd, just another guy working a job, struggling for a future that was slipping through my fingers. But now, I was the future. Waiters moved through the space carrying trays of champagne, glasses filled with vintage bottles that had been aged longer than some of the guests had been alive. The conversation was a constant hum of power, of whispers about corporate buyouts, international deals, investment opportunities that would never see the light of public markets. And I was in the center of it, flanked by beautiful women who draped themselves on my arm, models whose names the world knew. Their laughter, light, effortless, the kind of practiced charm that only came with knowing they were standing next to someone who mattered. I sipped my whiskey slowly, letting the rich, smoky warmth spread through me, my eyes scanning the room, taking in the faces of men who had once ignored me, who had once dismissed me as just another nobody. Now, they sought me out. But then, there she was. Vanessa. She had always liked the spotlight, always craved being seen in high places, always wanted to exist in the orbit of powerful men. And tonight, she had dressed for it, her gown shimmering under the golden glow of the chandeliers, her hair perfect, her smile calculated. Except something was off. It wasn't the same radiant confidence she used to have. It wasn't the same smug certainty that the world belonged to her, because she wasn't on top anymore. No, tonight she wasn't the one in control. She had spotted me the moment I walked in. I knew because I had felt her stare, the way her posture shifted, the way she clutched her champagne flute just a little tighter. But she had waited, hesitated, because now, she wasn't sure if she was even allowed to approach me, but eventually she did, because of course she did. I watched her make her way toward me, slow, deliberate, carefully navigating through the crowd as if she was afraid I'd disappear before she could reach me. The Vanessa I had once known never hesitated. But now she was unsure. That was already a victory. She stopped just a few feet away, looking up at me with a smile that was almost too perfect, her lips parting just slightly, the way they used to when she wanted something. "Jake," she said, her voice soft, laced with nostalgia. "We should talk. I've missed you." For a moment I said nothing. I let her wait. Let her stand there, drowning in the silence, in the weight of everything she had lost. Then I smirked, took another slow sip of my whiskey, and said, "You needed more, and you got it." The words hit her like a slap. She inhaled sharply, like she was going to argue, like she was going to say something, anything to justify herself. But she didn't, because there was nothing left to say. She had thrown me away for a man she thought was better. She had laughed in my face, watched me crumble, thought she had won. But now she was standing in front of the man she had never believed I could be. And she was realizing all too late that she had bet on the wrong future. I didn't give her a second glance. Instead, I turned slightly, leaning toward a billionaire investor standing nearby. One of the wealthiest men in the aviation industry, a man whose name could make or break an entire company with a single decision. And, just loud enough for Vanessa to hear, I said smoothly, "Some people are just bad investments." The billionaire laughed, a deep, knowing laugh. Others nearby chuckled, some smirking, some glancing at Vanessa with a mixture of amusement and pity. Her face turned red. She was drowning in the humiliation. And I was already walking away, because Vanessa, she wasn't worth my time anymore.